Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Microshift Project Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Nick Valinchak. That's Nicky V if you're nasty. We're here to talk about the trials and tribulations I went through in my late teens and early 20s, putting myself through a rough patch only to find hope and redemption and a path to not just survive and to thrive, but to thrive. Is how I should have said it. I was doing really good there. Did you see it? The look on my face, I was really into what I was saying. Anyway, as I've said before, this is an authentic, no-cut podcast. I'm not going to edit that out because perfection is not the goal here. Because at the end of the day, baby, you're already looking at perfection. Anyway, that's the wrestler in me. I can't get it out of me. It's what I always wanted to be. I ran the wrestling company. We're going to talk about that next episode. Last episode, we talked about a lot of the bullshit that I had been doing. And I told some stories about interactions I had because I really want people to see and hear just like the craziness that was that life that I was living at that time. Because it paints the picture to understand how impactful the interaction with the officer ended up being. And I encourage you, if you haven't heard that, I think you need to go back and listen to that podcast for this podcast effectively to make sense, because this episode that we're going to have today really kind of talks about, it's the only one of these five where 2 and 3 are literally the same 4 hours, right? They blend over. The other ones are weeks apart or sometimes even years apart. But these are like very closely related. The stories blend into one another. But just as a Cliff's Notes version, I had a cop pull me over, and instead of throwing me further into the system and putting me in the back of his cop car in cuffs and taking me to jail, where I probably would have done, more time, he allowed me the opportunity to be able to go to the rescue mission, and he showed mercy and he gave me dignity when I had only really understood despair and nothingness. And so the story today really picks up in the back seat of a cruiser. It's past 11:30. I don't remember if there was any conversation between the officer and I think for the most part, I probably sat there in the back thinking, because this is really now in the last 2 weeks, multiple situations between the car not wrecking, between strangers who stopped for me and then conversed with me like a human when I felt like I was well below that. Interaction with a cop who should have thrown the book at me and he didn't. And to be completely fair and honest with you, my interaction with Joyce, who was Anthony's mother, the DJ I told you about, who I stole his PlayStation and pawned it, instead of when I have my phone call with her, instead of her telling me how much of a disappointment I was and all of the bad things that any normal human being that I'm used to would have said, she tells me that, like, you need to go get help at the rescue mission. And so even in that, I've had all of these little interactions recently that I have not had in years and years and years, about giving me hope for my circumstance and possibly being able to get out of it. And I'm sure a lot of this stuff is playing in the back of my head, and I'm sure there's some nerves because I'm thinking about the fact that I drove here willingly earlier and parked my car in front of the building and said, I'm going to get out and do this. And I needed to lose my car in order to do that. And the funny story is, I really lost my car. It wasn't, my car was towed and, I couldn't have it that night. No, it was like, I want to say a few months after that my dad ended up coming to the mission and picking me up to go get the car, and it was being held on some kind of bond because of my ongoing legal situation. So even though we tried to physically get it, I couldn't. And that was probably another, divine intervention thing, because even at that point, 4 months in, if I had the car, like, it would have given me more of an opportunity to do stupid things. But I remember thinking about that much that night, is I had to lose my car in order to come here. Like, this is how much of an idiot you are, is that you can't even keep the one thing. You can't even keep something. You have to lose everything. And interestingly, they wouldn't let me bring both of my bags of clothes with me to the rescue mission. More or less, their kind of the police's response was like, this is, when we take your stuff, we have to take your stuff. It's everything. But he was nice enough. I pled with him that I had a sweater that I really liked, and I still have, and all of my family home videos. I've been carrying those around with me because that was like the last of anything where I could hear my mom's voice, was those. And it was really important that I had possession of them, that I knew where they were at all times, so that when I wanted to, if I could put them in a VCR and hear her voice. And so that was it. That's what I went to the rescue mission with. And I remember pulling into the parking lot with the officer. And now, again, to further understand this, the rescue mission's right next door to the Westlake projects, right? So, and it's an area I had been in many times before, buying drugs, hanging out, doing drugs, whatever. But it's still chilling to think, like, at one point you lived in an upper middle class area. Tonight you are going to be sleeping next to the projects. Like, this is what you've allowed your life to spiral to. There was a older Italian man named Frank Romandetti who was working that night. It had literally just hit midnight as I was getting out of the car. Frank was alone on his midnight shift. Frank also worked as a medic in the East Liverpool Hospital. And he was super cordial to the officer, gave me all kinds of up and down looks. Frank was a short Italian, Billy Goat Gruff type of guy that night. When you get to know him, you get to understand that he was a big teddy bear. But he carried himself with enough attitude that I was a little intimidated of him. And when we got to the back, he asked me a question. He said, "What's your name?" "Nick Valinchak." "How old are you?" 21. Just turned 21. "Where are you from?" "Canfield, Ohio." Now, all the other questions I answered confidently, but Canfield, Ohio, I knew when I said that, the type of reaction that I was going to get. I understood, being a con artist of sorts and a player of human emotions, I understood what Frank was doing to me there. Frank was setting me up to survey my situation and analyze that I was a 21-year-old from an upper middle class area that had somehow bottomed out so quickly that they were in a homeless shelter. And that's exactly what he said back. He said, "So you're 21 years old and you're from Canfield. What the hell are you doing in a homeless shelter?" And it did hit like a ton of bricks, because I guess I never really stopped to consider that that was where my actions could potentially lead me. I think up to this point, it had just been drugs were fun to do. Drugs became less fun, but more necessary to do. Drugs became an absolute necessity to do, drugs became the only thing to do. And so with all of that being the focus, I didn't really have time to analyze my situations and think about the very obvious things like this. But it was just like a rush of things came over me. And in those simple words, it wasn't that he was asking a simple question, but he was highlighting the nuances of everything that I knew, that I wasn't a victim. I had every opportunity in the world. It wasn't because of circumstances in my life not going right that I ended up where I'm at. I'm here and I'm looking at this mirror that he's holding up to me because of the fact that I willingly made terrible decision after terrible decision, and this was the result of all of those decisions. And I remember feeling that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has these moments. I'm sure that there are lots of people, and a lot of you out there can probably think about moments in their life when they were in these situations. And again, like a simple, innocuous conversation turns into something that you end up self-analyzing and mentally talking to yourself for minutes or hours throughout the day and night. And that's exactly what happened here. I'm having this conversation with Frank. He has to keep it short because he doesn't want to talk to me at midnight. He needs to get me up into the dormitory so that I can try to sleep, because if I remember correctly, wake up call there was sometime between like 5:30 and 6 o'clock. So I'm not having much time to sleep at this point, and I hadn't really slept well, nor was I going to sleep well that night, because once I got up into the 54-man dormitory, where I had gone from sleeping in a car by myself to now sleeping with 54 other men, I was on bunk 53, which was in the back right up against the wall on top. And I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, like, motherfucker, this is all your fault. And it wasn't one of those like pity party, it's all your fault, and you're mentally slipping back into the I want to be out. It was like, no, I, for the first time, am sitting down and thinking about this. And again, we talked about how I basically ended up here because I willingly tried to do something, didn't have the courage to face it on my own volition, but forces of nature forced it back onto me in completion by having the police officer bring me to a place I tried to escape from earlier that night, forcing my hand into this being the place where I reside. It was just a whirlwind that night, and I did manage to get some sleep. And not knowing much about the mission, I woke up the next morning and, got myself dressed, was obviously incredibly nervous about, like, what does the day look like? I was here for the night, but what does the day look like? And when I came downstairs, all of the daytime people were now there. Everybody was pointing at me like they'd never seen one of me before in their life. Like I was the first homeless, upper middle class young adult that has ever stepped foot into the rescue mission of Mahoning Valley. And to some extent, it was not common that it happened. And I remember the staff people, talking to me like, what do you want to do? Do you have to do something. You can't just, you can't just stay here. If you're going to do the transient program, you could stay here through the winter, but you have to leave during the day and you can't come back until 6 o'clock at night. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if I had a car, like, okay, fine, I could do that, but I don't have a car. So like, I need to be able to stay here. So what are my options? Well, you could try to do this resident program. Like, okay, well, I'm going to tell them I want to try to do it because I want to be able to stay inside. And then you come to find out that you actually get your own room And I was like, well, wait a minute. I just slept with 53 other dudes last night, and I'm going to have to shower with 53 of them tonight. So his own room and a private shower, not a private your own room shower, but like there's 15 people doing this program. Like you'll be able to find a way that two of you won't have to shower together throughout the day. That sounded like a really good thing. And as I sat down for breakfast that day, I was hit by like one of the biggest things I think of all, because I saw mothers and children and sometimes even full families parading through the dining area to sit down and eat. And I thought to myself, like, holy shit. These kids that are here, they had to worry about a roof being over their head. They had to worry about possibly being separated from their parent. They had to worry about what they were going to eat. And I never ever once thought about any of those things. That was not a concern in my mind at any point in time. I never even realized the concept, even though it's obvious that it has to exist. It never entered my mind that there are kids out there who don't have a place to rest their head. There are kids out there who don't know where their next meal was going to come from. And that is when the weight and gravity of all of this stuff really started to pile on more and more to me, and gave me a fullness of understanding, like, motherfucker, you better not sit there and boo-hoo yourself. You better not sit there and make excuses. There are kids here who are here out of nothing that they did wrong, but you are here because you did everything wrong. You are not the same. You will not make excuses. That is when I had the real, like, I fucked up, and I need to be able to pay for that. And Frank came back, but I'll talk about Frank in a second. I had a food situation. Now, I don't like fish. And somehow the first February 14th, Valentine's Day, ended up being a Friday. And at the mission, every Friday was, deep fried fish patties. And when I sat down to eat lunch that day, someone brought the food to me. And now, like, I think that Friday was sausage, gravy, and biscuits, but I was like, I'm don't really want to eat right now because I'm nervous about what this all is. So my first real food in like my first prepared meal in months is going to be something that I don't like to eat. I don't want to eat. And I remember them serving it to me. And there was this guy, his name was Eric Wallace. And he was in the program at that time. And he was really trying to convince me that it was like a really good idea for me to do the program. And he saw my reaction. And he was like, "You don't like fish, do you?" And I was like, "Man, I hate fish. It's like the one food that I won't eat." And he's like, "But you're hungry, aren't you?" I was like, "Man, I am. It's been over a day since I've actually eaten food. Like, I need to eat this. I need to eat food, and I cannot possibly say I don't like fish. Can I have something else?" So he's like, "Walk to the back with me." You go walk to the back with him, and he said, "You see that red bottle there?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "That's hot sauce. Have you ever had any?" And I was honestly, I'm 21 years old. I was like, "No, I've never had hot sauce." He was like, "Perfect. Take that stuff, dump a bunch of it on that fish, and it won't taste like fish anymore." And so I picked up the bottle, squirt, 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 till the thing was, almost not crispy anymore because it was so covered in hot sauce. And I sat down and I was just like, this is part of the uncomfortableness you have to put yourself through. And again, it's still one of those, how privileged am I still in this situation that my uncomfortableness is that I will not eat a piece of fish because I don't like it. You know, it could be so much worse. There are so many people who have to do so much more uncomfortable stuff, go through much more uncomfortable situations than that than I had to. But for me, that was a battle that I had to fight, because there would have been times where I would have just either thrown it away or acted like maybe I wouldn't have acted like one of those rich pricks who feels like everything is owed to them. But I might have at least gotten the courage to get up and be like, listen, man, you know, I don't really like fish. Is there anything else I can eat? But I was like, no, you need to absorb this. You need to understand that things are going to happen to you, especially while you're here, that you don't have control over and you don't like, but you need to figure out how to deal with it, because your response system to this point has been to just do whatever's easy for you. And that's why you're in a fucking homeless shelter at 21. So I ate the fish, and it was like, I was proud of eating the fish. As silly as that sounds, I was like, this is a situation where you normally would have done something else, but you did it. Build off of this. Keep fucking going. And Frank came in that night, and he pulled me aside and he said, hey, they said you were interested in doing the program. And I said, yeah, I mean, I'm after being here today, I understand that I need to do this program because I need to get my life in place, and I need to stop pretending, and I just need to do. I need to do, and I need to get past my bullshit. And he was like, I'm proud of you. And I told him, Frank, you know, what you did for me last night unknowingly was allow me to reflect very quickly on all of the stuff that brought me to where I'm at today. And it's something that I've never had to do before, because maybe people haven't said it to me the right way. Maybe I wasn't ready to do it. I'm not sure what the limitations were and why I was not able to achieve it. But our limited conversation yesterday and the way you presented your information to me really made me think and made me feel again. And he kind of nodded his head like that was my intention. And things weren't easy. I can tell you just, you know, another quick fun story. Probably like 2 weeks into doing this program, and I will admit that I was still very much out in the streets mentally. You know, I was the rescue mission at this time. It is like a little embarrassing to say. It's not really that embarrassing to say. I don't know. It was like a little fuck fest, because there were a bunch of younger-ish people coming off of drugs, male and female. And it turns out that all they wanted to do, the one thing we all had in common, is that we were all just fucking horny. And so as young people would do, we would go to the hospital, and they had a big tree. We'd be fucking in the trees and stuff like that. It was a whole fucking thing. And it almost imploded for me, where, you know, several people got in trouble for, you know, one of the rules were like, boys can't talk to girls, girls can't talk to boys. And, you know, it turns out that like a lot of us were talking to a lot of us, and multiple combinations and permutations. And I got called down to the office one day, and they were like, hey, you know, you're out. We know that you've been messing around with this person and this person, and, you know, we can't have that here. And I was like, when they said that, I was like, you get a second lease on life, and this is what the fuck you do. You know, you can't keep it in your pants, and now you've got to go somewhere else. Don't remember his last name for whatever reason, but there was a guy named Russell. There were 4 of us. There were 2 like adults, we'll call them, who were getting booted, and 2 younger guys. Dwayne and I were probably like 21 and 23, I think. Russell went into the office to talk to the guy who was in charge. He was like, listen, At 40 plus years old, me and Doug, we know better. You know, we shouldn't be doing this stuff that we did. But Nick and Dwayne, these young guys, you can't put them out on the street because they're just going to keep coming back here for years and years and years, and they won't break the cycle. Let them stay here while they're young. Let them get this stuff figured out while they're young. And by the grace of God, I could hear from the other room that the director was like, okay, that's a fair point. They did something they shouldn't have done, but they're young enough that they still have some excuses left. And I do a little bit feel like Russell sacrificed himself for Dwayne and I. And at that point, I stopped briefly. Did I don't know if another word came out after stopped or not, but we'll discuss that in a minute. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do that. And a couple days later, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm up in my room listening to music. I would walk up to the corner. So I love hip hop music, like love it. Still keep current to this day because I love it so much. I'm not just one of those guys who like the music that I grew up with is the best. Like I listen to stuff, and stuff pops in and out. Right now I'm in a big O Block, Chief Keef, King Von, Dirk, FBG Duck, FGB Duck. I always get it mixed up. All these guys from the drill scene, like I'm into that. I understand that's 13 years ago. Some of it's maybe 10 years ago, but I bounce back and forth. But I loved it, and they used to, like I think it's Hot 97 used to release mixtape CDs, and the corner stores in Youngstown, these dudes would just burn CDs and sell the burned CDs for like $5. So I had like $5 I got from someone and went and bought it and was listening to a CD at 11 o'clock at night, and I hear knock, knock, knock on my door. And I'm like, this 11 o'clock at night, this is probably a turn your music down situation. And I go up to the door and I'm like, what's up? And James, who was working that night, was like, you got some visitors. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, some of my friends heard I was at the mission and I'm trying to do the right thing. And they're coming back to tell me that we're going to be friends again. And I think sometimes, like, I've had this experience where I'm thinking something as I'm, like, performing an activity. And as I'm getting ready to turn the door, in the back of my head, I'm like, no, idiot. It's 11 o'clock at night. They're not going to let your fucking drug addict friends into the rescue mission to see you. And so I open up the door, and I mean, my heart just dropped because in the hallway is like 15 U.S. Marshals. And I end up finding out from James months later. He told me, he's like, we thought you might have actually killed somebody. There were that many U.S. Marshals there. And the first one of them looks at me and he's like, do you know why we're here? And I remember thinking to myself, like on the spot, like, you could be here for 118 different fucking things I did, varying from very small misdemeanors to like double digit in prison activities. So I'm like, fuck, what's like the lowest end thing you can think of? And I remembered for some reason, like when you talked to Joyce told you she had to file charges. So I was like, because I stole the PlayStation from Joyce and Anthony, and they were like, yep. I was like, oh my God. I don't know how I guessed this right, but I mean, I had been selling drugs. I've been selling drugs in a fucking school zone. There were a lot of things that I could have potentially been taken down for. This was like a godsend to me. And so the U.S. Marshals absolutely took me, and it was really weird. They took me, instead of the jail, which was 2 minutes down the street, they took me to the Canfield Police Department, where the police chief yelled at me and then drove me back down to jail. And I was in jail for probably like a month and a half, something like that, 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe more, I don't know. 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. I think about a month. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I am like in jail. I have a great bunkie, thank God. He actually kind of saved me from some weirdo, which is a weird thing to say, but like they were moving us from Gen Pop to where you're going to be a little bit longer term, which was a scary thing because I'd been in like doing weekends and stuff where I stay here for 3 days. You know, I did the misdemeanor jail for a couple weeks at a time. But I had never been in the actual jail itself outside of their like, not their holding unit, but like the next level above where they're getting ready to place you. And so like late one night, guards come in, blah, 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 whoop, whoop. They are like, all right, you know, you guys you're getting moved to this pod. They break us all off into chunks. I'm sitting with like 5 or 6 people. They're like, we have 3 open cells. You know, you guys have to pair up. And this weird dude was like, I think he had a reputation as not being a chomo, but as being a pervert and just, you know, whatever. And I think the one dude saw it and was like, nah, we're not. I had been playing cards with them and we had been cool. He's like, nah, I'm not letting this fly off. You're going to bunk with me. And so it was, you know, for being in jail, and it was at a time when the Mahoning County Sheriff's Department was on like super short, and we were spending oftentimes like 22, 23 hours a day locked down sometimes. I'm not saying that was the entire stint, but we definitely had days where like we got out for an hour and that was it. It wasn't as awful as it could have been, but you still didn't want to be there. And especially like, dang, I was finally starting to get momentum on getting my life in shape, and here I am. How do I explain to my dad that like, well, I was at the mission, but now I'm in jail? And so I went to court and they released me. And then I went back and I'm thinking like, well, I'm going to get out tonight. I didn't get out tonight, didn't get out the next night. And I'm starting to like freak out like, dang. And one thing about jail is that everybody's there as an attorney. So they're telling you like, oh, you know, all these dudes are like, well, if you got released, you know, and they're keeping you here, you get $80 a day for them holding you longer than they have to and all this nonsense. But the one dude came up to me, was like, listen, man, like all these dudes may be on their bullshit and trying to tell you like how you can get this from the feds or whatever. But I'm going to tell you real talk. Like if you haven't been released, that's because you have an outstanding warrant from somewhere else. And I was like, fuck. Because like I had said, I mean, I knew that there was other stuff that I had been doing that I could have gone down for. And I was like, shit, yeah, that tracks. Like I'm in a lot of trouble here. And I had that in the back of my mind, and the days kept going and nothing, weeks went nothing. I'm playing basketball one day and I'd pretty much put getting out of jail out of my mind. Like I'm here, I'm going to probably be here for a while, because I know that my luck at this point dictates like I start to make some positive motion, there's going to be a huge negative that comes and blows shit up for me. And I'm playing basketball and I hear Valenchak, and I'm like, oh shit, like it's about to go down. And so I go up and I'm like, what's going on? And the CO was like, well, they lost your release papers, but they found him. And I was like, oh my, thank God. And so I had worked out this deal with my bunkie at this point, because I had started to kind of give up and like whatever. And he told me like, look, whenever you get out, I'm going to have my girl come pick you up. She's going to take you back to the place we're staying. You can, you know, you can get clean on your own. As long as you stay off of oxys. I mean, you could smoke, you can drink. And so she'll come here, she'll meet you with the deuce of Bud Ice. That's what I like to drink at the time. You know, this, you know, everything will be fine. And so I tell him, hey, I'm getting out of here. So he calls his girl and I get in the elevator. And dude, the biggest CO I've ever seen is like silent, looking at me, looking down on me. This dude had to be like 6'6", 285, just Jack Diesel, dude. And I just had this epiphany. And I remember looking up and being like, all right, God, you've seen what I can do with my life. This is what I do when Nick's in charge. Prove to me that you can do something more with my life. And this huge officer's just looking at me like I'm an absolutely insane person, because this isn't like a mental battle I'm having. this is an out loud battle that I'm having. And so, it takes a little bit. You got to get changed, whoop, you do the release thing, you get out, they let you out, elevator up, let you out the front doors. I'm coming down the stairs. I see the car dude had sent for me, and I'm walking toward it. And in mere fashion of what I did, pulling into the rescue mission and pulling out, I took 2 steps towards the car and then started running up the street towards the rescue mission. And I came into the rescue mission, and they were all surprised to see me. And I broke down like, this is what happened. I had a misdemeanor. I had all the paperwork. I had a misdemeanor charge. You know what I'm saying? They just didn't have an address for me. It's not like you change your address to the rescue mission, so they had no idea where to find me when they were looking for me on the warrant. That's why they sent all the officers here, and I'm clean, blah, 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 blah. I want to do this. And so I was just like, yeah, we're going to do this. And lots of things happened. I ended up meeting a woman I married there, which was ultimately the worst decision I've ever made in my life. But you have to make stupid mistakes, I guess, even when things are going well, to kind of let you know that you still have the potential to make stupid mistakes. It's not cute to marry someone who's also a drug addict and going through that process. I wish more people would have thought it was less cute and understood the damage. And there were a contingent of people who were like, this is incredibly fucking dumb. But there were way too many more people that were like, this is God ordained and it's perfect. And I wish I would have listened to less of those people. But I ended up working at the rescue mission for 10 years after that, roughly 10 years, in a variety of capacities. And it was a very trying time for me personally. I was very thankful for the opportunity to be able to work with the clients. I think that sometimes you endure situations and go through things in life to give you better perspectives. And I think this is what a lot of this was. It was very hurtful to hear multiple people tell me that I was not ever really seriously considered for any promotions, despite my background, despite the fact that I had a passion for it, despite the fact that I was respected by my peers and the clients as well, because they were just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What I will say damningly to people like that is, for a facility that professes Jesus Christ and second chances, that's a real hypocritical position to take. But ultimately, it all ended up working out for the best for me. I don't think I would have really, when I was at the mission, I look at those times as being survival. I was still in survival mode. It took years past that and 2 additional instances to where I was able to get off the path of survival and onto the route of thriving. I will not say many good things about working at the rescue mission, other than my interaction with the clients there and the ability to help some people who were willing to take it. I had some good interaction with some employees. I can tell many horror stories about what working in an organization like that could be like when there are a lot of people who are not doing things in accordance with not just the rules of the facility, but the rules given from above. But that's not what this is really about. To kind of round this podcast out, what I will say is that I'm thankful for what the rescue mission was able to provide me, but I'm also willing to say that the rescue mission served the purpose it's there for. When somebody comes out of the rescue mission, we should applaud the person for the fullness of what they were able to get from the experience, but understand that nothing special from a business perspective happened. This is why people go to facilities like that. That's their mission statement. That's why people donate money to places like this to stay open is so that lives can be changed. And I think sometimes that thought gets lost by the people who are working there. But I want to take 1 second to talk about Frank, because within the last few months, Frank unfortunately passed away. And I don't think he was out of his mid to late 60s. I could be wrong. He always had some medical issues, unfortunately. And one thing I always made it a point to do when I could is to tell him, to tell his wife, Karen, who also worked at the rescue mission as the receptionist, to tell Chris, his son, who I have a somewhat friendly relationship due to us having some shared interests, and I still communicate with him here and there when I see him. I was always very passionate about telling all of them how much Frank had an impact on me. And I think a lot of times they just may have taken it as like, yeah, that's great. You know, Frank had an impact on a lot of people, and I'm glad that they're able to say that about Frank. But I think my hope is that hearing the fullness of this story and exactly all the emotions and things going through me at a very volatile point in my life will really help them understand how impactful he was on my life. And for me, while Frank might be gone, he will never be forgotten. I intend to continue to talk about this story, to tell this story, to tell about the impact that he had on me for as long as I'm given opportunity to talk to people. I'm thankful for that night. You know, I think a lot of people would look at their period of being a drug addict and say, like, I have a lot of regrets. I've chosen to not live with regrets in life. All of those things are just lessons learned. All of those are opportunities to make sure that someone else doesn't have to go through the same type of trouble that I went through. So if my pain can be someone else's gain, then I'm all here for it. I'm really excited to be able to have the ability to talk on a platform like this, to have people listen to the things that I say, internalize them, maybe make themselves better people. And I'm going to talk about next time one of my favorite subjects, and that's professional wrestling. Now, we're only, 4 podcasts in, including the intro. So I haven't really gotten to talk too much about stuff other than like what led me to getting to the mission and stuff like that. But now we're starting to move more into the like, well, what happened after? And I'm excited because it's not just about wrestling, which I loved. It's about Championship Wrestling Experience, a professional wrestling company I started with my best friend Kyle in 2006. First event was run in 2007. And one of the people that I came across along the way who will never have the opportunity to know the impact that they have on my life. But next time, you will all hear about exactly what that was. Until then, I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for giving me your time, for giving me your attention. And if you feel like it, giving me your dollars. Okay, I'm just kidding. I don't need your dollars. Your attention and your time is well enough served for me. I'm very appreciative. Until then, please subscribe. If you feel like you know someone who may benefit from hearing these perspectives, and things are going to start to change dramatically because we only have 2 more episodes of the prologue before we really get into the nitty-gritty of talking to other people about their interactions in life and what have helped them get to the point where they're at. But if you feel like anything you've heard up to this point could help someone, please pass the podcast along. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcast at. You can make sure to follow me on social media. I'm on at Nick from CWE on most social medias. You could follow my company and this podcast at the Microshift. And please make sure to join us on the next episode because I'm really excited to talk about wrestling. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.